Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you are here. Welcome to this Taurus new moon forecast where we're going to go over the main astrological themes for the next 2 weeks. Take a look at our temporal roadmap. This is shaping up to be a lot of an energetic check-in as well, based on my own personal experiences. Not certainly in the last 2 weeks since the full moon that we had, but even just throughout this whole eclipse window, because now we're truly coming out of the shadow of the eclipse cycle as a whole, right? Because we are in our balsamic moon phase, a lunar phase that started with a solar eclipse. We're at the tail end of it now. Tomorrow, the 27th, I'm recording this obviously on the 26th. 27th is the new moon in Taurus, and things are going to be manifesting much more immediately and on the surface from here on out. We're out, like I said, of the shadow of the eclipse experience, which is very deep and operating at the soul level, not something that is necessarily operating at the conscious level or even at the individual level. It is something that is much more to do with the soul and its direction and where we are really being pulled in order to grow. So, boy, we have so much to talk about. So definitely some energetic check-in here. I am going to officially announce the launch of my new membership site. It's all through my website, catalystenergies.net. It is monthly subscription. You have your own dedicated login and membership site. This is where I'll be posting the collective energy readings for those of you who will be part of the membership site. Just stick around to the end if you're interested. If you're on my email list, you already know all about this because I did a soft launch for people on my email list and those who are already subscribed, so you guys know all about it. But if you're interested, and certainly if you want to get more content on a regular basis that is exclusive to those who are part of the membership site, then stick around. I'll tell you all about it at the end. But for now, let's just dive right into this transmission. So yes, we're going to talk about the new moon in Taurus, and we're going to take a nice look at the astrology of the next 2 weeks. However, there's a couple things energetically that have really brought themselves to my awareness through, like I said, personal experience, talking to clients, interacting with friends and acquaintances, family members, etc. So some generalized spiritual guidance here for all of us. And also, hopefully, to just, sorry if there's any residual noise. I gotta have the window open. It's just a necessity right now. So hopefully this microphone is picking up the only real sound and you're not too disturbed by the random motorcycle going up and down my road. So, all right, friends, things are moving at a rapid pace, it feels like. And I know that that's been the case for a while, but it is pretty obvious for anybody who is energetically tapped in, who is on a path of very intentional spiritual journey, and just being tuned into the overlay of things spiritually and energetically. It's pretty obvious at this point that there has been a massive shift. And I know that their shift in the energy and shift in frequency is almost an overplayed phrase. I mean, you could basically say that any week and you'll probably get some clicks about it, but this is pretty obvious. And a lot of it does feel like it's natural. It's coming from the solar activity, which has been substantial. There's been very large coronal holes. There have been, CMEs that have come. And as the magnetic field of the planet is getting weaker and preparing to shift position or whatever it's doing, we are being bombarded and in a lot of cases, definitely bombarded and influenced more by solar particles and plasma that gets into our magnetosphere and into our ionosphere. And so that has an effect on everything that's biochemical, electrical, which is everything. So lots of reports over the last 2 weeks, especially since the full moon. And I think that full moon was really this point of like, okay, this is what you're made of, because now that this last 2 weeks has been kind of a readjustment and also putting that to the test in some ways. So a full moon is a time where we clarify our purpose, and we have to consciously and objectively apply those things that we have come to understand, that have been illuminated by the full moon. When we clarify our purpose and feel a sense of fulfillment, it's not enough in that moment. It has to actually be applied to something, and a lot starts getting stripped away. And so over the last 2 weeks, I think people have been experiencing it in all kinds of different ways, just healings, a lot of really uncomfortable physical symptoms. Now, like I said, I feel like a lot of this has been actual upgrades. I don't say that lightly, because again, it's another one of those buzz phrases, like ascension symptoms, that you can just throw around, and it can apply to just about anything, right? But I do feel like that's been happening quite a bit. But the other side of that, and the Schumann resonance has been very active on almost a daily basis for weeks on end. Almost every day, maybe every other day, there has been a pretty substantial amplification. And so, the wave function of the magnetic field of our own planet is getting louder. It's having these big bursts every day. So that part, I feel like there is the natural, modulation, if you want to call it that, of the planet herself and the sun and the interaction, and we're just going along with it, right? And some people it's uncomfortable. I think for a lot of us, it's been very uncomfortable physically. I know it has been for me, and before this happened, I know I was getting a lot of intuitive insight and in dream time, in meditation, symbolically, that was really preparing me for the need to just reinforce certain boundaries, be prepared to be resilient in the face of a challenge, and the normal biochemical means that often will treat and mitigate some of the symptoms that are going along with this increase in frequency that seems to be happening here. Those things are not working as well, right? And that's usually my clue that this is much less about the chemistry, right? The things that you take in order to minimize inflammation or to help your stomach or, the discomfort in your body. This is definitely much more physics related and energetic. And so naturally, yes, but I think the other side of that is that there has been the counterpoint of that through artificial means, right? And whether you identify that is as HARP or direct energy weapons or electronic warfare, whatever, spiritual warfare, I think that can just be the umbrella term. There has been the counterpoint to that. I've had ringing in my ears this week that I haven't had in months and months and months. I mean, it's needing to be a very consistent process in order to manage and stay grounded amidst this back and forth chatter, if you want to call it that, because it's the natural upgrades that are happening and an attempt to suppress or invert that in some way. And it all is uncomfortable, and we're all just kind of living through it right now. So what else seemed to happen along with this is part of the same experience, is that especially very recently, and it might have come in waves, so I can't say for sure, but at least in my own personal life and other people as well, what it does seem like is that many things reorganized themselves very quickly. Shifted around. The pieces on the board had shifted around into new locations all of a sudden and just found their center. All seemingly out of nowhere. Some things had been prepared for. Some things had been worked up to over times. The groundwork had been laid, but the actual reorganization of the pattern happened very quickly. And it actually reminds me of cymatics. So If you are familiar with cymatics, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're not, it's not a terrible thing to maybe familiarize yourself. I did actually do an entire video about sound and frequency and cymatics. If you just scroll down on whatever platform you're on, you'll eventually get to a series called Defense Against the Dark Arts, and it's the second video, and it's about sound healing, frequency, and cymatics as part of the toolkit, but also as part of the warfare, right? And what cymatics is. So I thought, just in case you're not familiar here, you can just type in cymatics. You can do your own research, like I said, but it's like, here, let me share the screen and then you can get a sense of what I'm talking about if you don't already know. So this is just a Google search, cymatics, cymatics, and I did it on images to just show you images. And the idea of this is the science and the study of how sound, which is just a mechanical vibration, all right, affects matter. And so the idea here is that you introduce different frequencies to a plate where all these particles are on, and they take shape based on the vibration and the sound that is introduced into the medium, which is like a plate, and you put like sand or some sort of particles on it, and then you add vibration, usually by just taking a bow and physically adding a different tone or vibration to that plate, and the particles will rearrange themselves into different patterns based on the frequency. And actually, one of the things in the videos that I did was point out the research that was somewhat recent. And if you see the title on this, The Influence of Vibration and Sound on Human Cells, there's actually a whole field of study about this, and discoveries that the cells do actually respond to and correspond to sound, the human cell, probably all cells, right? And they function in the same way. They function under the principles of cymatics, that their shape and the patterns will change based on the sound and the frequency that's introduced. And just keep in mind, again, sound is just mechanical vibration. You can get vibration from sound, you can get it from light, you can get it from magnetism, okay? It feels to me like we have been, inundated with this higher frequency more consistently, naturally, and life as a material life that is really just a frequency come to fruition, I suppose, has responded to this change in frequency that has been introduced quite naturally by the sun and corresponding to, the earth, that things have rearrange themselves into a quite different pattern very suddenly, almost to the point where it seems like it's supposed to be there. That I remember not that long ago, I said to my spouse, I'm like, it feels like if you ever watched the Marvel series called Loki, it's all about time and timelines. And there's this concept of like a sacred timeline, and then they have all these branches that keep coming off and veering off. And it just felt like, oh, we just kind of just went back on, the sacred timeline, we just kind of veered back onto it. Like we were on some sort of alternative that wasn't even really real. And like, the natural upgrades that are coming from the sun and the cosmos and the earth put everything into a new pattern and kind of steered us right back onto this, which was always there. It's just, I think that we were kind of caught up in this idea, or caught up in this story that we were on a different one. I'm still working with this concept, so, I'm not trying to say definitively, oh, this is what happened. This is just the experience that I had, and this is the thing that made the most sense. I was like, this is kind of like cymatics, like the pattern had just changed. So really, let me know, and let us know in the comments if you're having a similar experience, if you've been having a really hard time the last 2 weeks physically, even though you have been consistently kind of keeping up with your energetic hygiene, for instance. And I think it's just a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are adjusting to a new frequency that is changing our pattern. And since we're living beings in the process, it's kind of uncomfortable. But yet there's also the influence of those forces that are still desperately trying to hold on to control in some way. And, I think the Schumann is definitely a carrier wave for things that are artificially induced. And I don't want to get too much into that on YouTube, but I think a lot of you are probably at least somewhat on the same page about those things. I don't think it's just one or the other. And I think, whether the Schumann resonance is reflecting a natural amplification or is the result of something from HARP, for instance, that's being sent out on a carrier wave, I think you have to get much more discerning, all of us, right, in terms of that. It can't be, I just don't think it's just one or the other. I think it's way more nuanced. But with all that being said, things are moving at a pretty rapid rate, and we're going to stop sharing this cymatic. So I encourage you to look that up for sure. And I'm gonna bring up the chart so we can just get right into it, because I want to show you it's not, things are moving at a rapid pace, and I think they're going to stay at this frequency for the foreseeable future. That's certainly what seems like is happening to me, like just getting used to where it's at. And so it's going to take some adjustment. And as much as these squares, and we're going to talk about this grand square, this fixed grand square that's happening along with the new moon in Taurus that's coming, is, these are situations that we can't just like bypass and get out of. And we're talking about fixed energies of Taurus, Leo, Black Moon Lilith right now, and Pluto in Aquarius. These are all the fixed signs in a grand square. So already a grand square is something that you can't really get out of. It is, you just bounce from corner to corner to corner, right? There's friction, 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 and the only way out is through, right? You have to find a way to get out through. You can't just like climb over. You can't go under, right? You can't just bust through the wall. There is a process of, like I said, only way out is through. And these squares the squares in astrology, whether they're just a square, a T-square, or in this case, a grand square with all this fixed energy, there is the potential for so much of an upgrade in itself because of the way that we manage and work through the friction and the frustration that comes with a grand square. And then you have all the fixed signs in this grand square, which means that every position is staunchly itself, and there's not a lot of wiggle room, there's not a lot of momentum to push in another direction. It is very much where it is. And so I think that has also presented itself. Now, especially today, yesterday and today, you have Mars and Pluto in a direct opposition, and then you have them in a T, they're coming into a T square with Black Moon Lilith, because it's retrograde right now, in Scorpio, which is the sign that both of these planets rule. And Black Moon Lilith is a deep, primal, very powerful shadow element of our subconscious and our soul. It's something that is something often that we hide, or maybe that we're ashamed of with Black Moon Lilith. And so you have these two elements, Mars and Pluto, in an opposition with each other in fixed energies. One is the performer, which is Mars and Leo, and Aquarius is the audience, and Pluto is much more of a collective transformation, but they still both rule Scorpio. This energy right now, even since yesterday, and is really reaching a peak. And when the new moon happens, it's going to really solidify. And what I would say is that there is, how do I say this? Don't necessarily overthink it. And just because you may be able to anticipate, it's important to be able to anticipate and prepare for expectable conditions, right? Because there is a lot of power struggle right now with Mars and Pluto, especially when they both rule the sign of Scorpio, which is about power, which is about what goes on underneath the surface, right? What's at the depth? What is at the root of things? Where is the root of power? Scorpio is also about what we owe and the balance of power, and death, sex, and taxes, right? I mean, it's also the sign of death and rebirth, right? This is where it's ruled by Pluto, because this is where the regeneration comes from. And in Scorpio and in the eighth house, for instance, you sacrifice your own ego, which is really difficult for Mars and Leo right now. And is creating its own tension with Black Moon Lilith in this area. So I'm pointing out this grand square because things are moving very rapidly. There has been a very sudden shift in the pattern, and things are rearranging in order to correspond to this new frequency that has been really bombarding us for the last 2 weeks. And then we're going to, kind of, especially with the new moon, like in this box. And it's the idea that we are developing the capacity to foresee and to prepare for what we foresee, even if we don't necessarily want to foresee it, or we don't want to. It's something that I talked about in the collective energy reading that I just put out for the membership, which was it was an Easter lecture by Manly P. Hall, and he brought out this dynamic, this oppositional dynamic of what we want to do and what we ought to do. And I expanded on it more of what we are compelled to do and what we want to do and what we're responsible for doing. What is, what we're doing as a collective, right, which is Pluto in Aquarius, and how the collective is going through transformation. It's one thing that Mars in Leo is feeling confident and bold and assertive and very self-expressive in terms of what we want as individuals, right? Mars ruling the ego. But the reality is that there's a very big change that is happening, and there's something very valuable about this new moon, really setting the intention for all of us to develop this capacity to anticipate and prepare for expectable conditions, right? We're coming out of the eclipse, like I said, the eclipse window now. And so we know that things that had been really intended and activated with this eclipse cycle is going to grow over the course of the next 5 to 6 months, taking us into September. And now, what is developing at this point, what the potential is all of this friction with this grand square is, I think, really allowing us to find our center in the midst of all of this frustration. And it's in this grand square. There are moments that we're all going through that feel like we need a release from this pressure. And it's in there, and it's different for everyone. And finding a healthy way to channel this energy and to go through it as opposed to trying to conquer it or get out of it. It could be healing something significant. It could be it could be tensions within any type of relationship. It's really important to know where these things are happening in your chart as well, to know how it's affecting your own personal life. But for all of us, it is this combination of where what we have accumulated, what is valuable to us, what type of skills we have developed, and how we can apply that to preparing for what we see. And, what also happens in Scorpio is, especially with Black Moon and Lilith here, there is this capacity to, it's like an occult mirror. And in fact, there's a transit that's coming soon after this new moon that I'm going to go to next that very much is like the mirror, right? The holding up of the mirror to ourselves in order to have an objective view. But whatever tension you're feeling, whatever situation feels like you can't get out of, or that you feel kind of like trapped, realize here that always there's always a way to find your own, I don't want to say control, but your own sovereignty in any situation. And yes, the things happening outside of you, you may not have necessarily any control over, but you have the capacity to foresee where things are going and to take what you have developed so far and continue to develop it in order to prepare for what is to come. So this is where the new moon starts, with this grand square. And like I said, it does feel kind of like cymatic in that things have adjusted very quickly to a new frequency, or a modulated frequency that has been coming in for the last couple of weeks, via, I think, mostly the sun, and the way that the earth has responded to that, which directly affects all of us. So there may be a need for all of us to upgrade our energetic hygiene, for instance. Maybe we need to engage in certain activities to really give ourselves the opportunity to clear away the past, right? So that we can actually have a view of the future and not kind of get mired in what has been, okay? So let's move forward to this next so this is the new moon on the 27th, okay? And Venus is going to come into Aries, right? And it's going to meet Neptune on the 2nd. So one other thing I'd like to point out before I move on, just to give some context for why things I think are really moving. Mercury is now out of its retrograde shadow. It's now at 10 to 11 degrees of Aries as of the new moon. And Jupiter is out of its retrograde shadow. That has been a long time coming. Jupiter in Gemini. And I'll tell you what, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. It is going to be a great Cancer season with Jupiter along for the ride, or just like really, setting the tone of optimism and a sense of real social wealth to the family and to the home and to this sense of cohesion emotionally and our root system. I'm just really excited about, because Jupiter is coming out of it's been in Gemini for so long through the retrograde, and now coming out of it soon and into Cancer. It's going to be really nice. So in the meantime, though, Jupiter's coming out of its retrograde shadow, which means it's expanding on new knowledge, new information, after having to go back and forth and, do an inner deep dive on things that we've already thought about and really reconsider them and what we believe, right? Because Jupiter has even Sagittarius and Pisces ruling both of those signs, it's about the belief and about the experience of oneness and understanding and the alchemy that is, spiritual transformation. Now Jupiter is moving into new territory. And in fact, Jupiter and Mercury, by the full moon, are going to come into a sextile with each other, which is really going to provide a lot of opportunity in terms of what we know and what we understand, right? But in the meantime, I can feel things ramping up, and they have been, but especially now that Mercury is out of its shadow, it really is just kind of kicked into gear in terms of information, communication, the assertiveness of Mercury in Aries with our communication, our bold speech, and really putting ourselves out there. And then certainly Jupiter coming into new territory in Gemini, this last decan of Gemini, which means it's getting more powerful as it's getting closer to Cancer. So it's expanding more on these ideas and really enveloping them in a big picture perspective without losing sight of the details. I think that's I am really feeling that from this last decan of Jupiter in Gemini as it's coming out of its shadow. So in the meantime, we're going to move forward here to the 2nd of May. So we're in our first by the time we get to the full moon, or the new moon, excuse me, something else to keep in mind here is that Uranus is now in conjunction with Algol. It is in conjunction with the Pleiades, of course, and it's meeting with the nodes of the moon, and that's also happening early May as well. So that's what we're kind of looking at here, is moving into early May while we're still in our new moon phase, and looking at what Uranus is doing, but specifically Venus moving into Aries, which she is not at her best. She was a lot happier in Pisces, but meeting Neptune. So at least there is this familiar place that Venus can land coming into Aries, which is a territory that she's not really at her best in, right? Venus representing Taurus and the opposite sign of Libra, right? That is balanced and symmetrical and measured and patient and secure and comfortable. Those things with Taurus in particular, coming into Aries where it's, spark and electricity and, penetrating. These are not the Venusian qualities of stillness and receptivity. And so she can be kind of, going after what she wants, right? She can kind of get into that space a little bit more than we really are meant to be. But meeting Neptune at this degree of 2 degrees of Aries can really spark some very intense creative inspiration and spiritual connections. And I think the big part of the inspiration and the connection when these two meet, because of course Neptune is very broad spectrum about humanity and humanity as a whole spiritually, but Venus is much more of a personalized experience where each of us can relate to what is valuable and meaningful to us. And so when these two meet, it really kind of broadens and infuses that personalized experience with the spark of creative inspiration. Certainly romantic fantasies too, because Venus rules relationships, and Neptune certainly rules the realm of fantasy, and you can feel that, that jolt or that spark, and it's intense. But this particular degree of Aries is about the capacity to look objectively, because Aries is by its own nature very subjective. So the second degree of all the signs represents some sort of opposing but balancing energy to the sign. And so this is very objective. A comedian reveals human nature. And I think stand-up comedy is one of the most difficult art forms, and is some of the most powerful if it's done right, because it does exactly this. It provides the capacity to look objectively at ourselves and in our culture within the framework of humor and being able to even laugh at ourselves. So these two coming together at this point really can channel this into something productive, either self-expression or a heartfelt pursuit. And maybe we feel, at this time to be inspired to stay grounded in these pursuits, and to really be able to look objectively at ourselves and look objectively at ourselves spiritually and the whole. I think that how, again, knowing where this is in your chart is going to give you a sense of the area of life. But I think this is one of those moments that we get to, feel more inspired and connected when we are able to step back and look at things objectively, and even find the value in that process, rather than either overlooking things, avoiding them, bypassing them. And I would say that the grand square at the new moon is kind of, doesn't really... We can't really bypass anything, because otherwise we're just going to stay trapped in a prison of our own making. And this conjunction with Venus and Neptune at this degree of Aries gives us the opportunity to look at ourselves and look at our culture in the mirror and be like, oh, we're not really trapped at all. If we just look at ourselves from a different angle or look at things objectively, we can see the humor in the situation and actually see, the things for what they are, and maybe how we can make some change or, channel this energy into something productive. So the fourth, right after it, is when we're in our crescent moon phase, and that's always a time where you're just like, oh, the obstacles are starting to kind of present themselves in terms of this next lunar cycle, which if we go back, the Sabian symbol is a sleigh on bare land, land that's not covered by snow. And it's, again, the value, right? That's a very Taurus theme. The value of anticipating and preparing, right? Not only are you anticipating because there's already been snow, why you have a sleigh, but preparing for the conditions. The snow will come again and you already have something. Maybe it needs some work, right? Maybe you need to repair it. Maybe you need to just replace it. Maybe it's just about knowing and cultivating the capacity to do this. That's where the new moon starts. So the crescent moon phase is like, okay, now we're starting to, be presented with the obstacles and the challenges, and we're reacting to them. And then we get to our first quarter moon. So, which is Sunday the 4th, right? May 4th. May the 4th be with you. May 4th and 5th has a lot going on. So this is next weekend in our first quarter moon phase, which is the moon in Leo. So, number one, Mars is now out of its retrograde shadow at this point. So that's very important. And is at the Beehive cluster. So I encourage you to do some research about that if you're interested in fixed star astrology and starseed and galactic astrology, because the Beehive cluster in the Cancer constellation, also known as the Manger, has some pretty significant connections to like the origins of humanity. In that cluster of stars in Chinese astrology is given the phrase the spirit of the ancestors, right? So Mars is at this point and it's coming out of its retrograde shadow. So again, now there's especially Mars in a fire sign, things are really going to start moving by next weekend. And then you're going to have, like I said, the Mercury and Jupiter sextile on top of this is going to really just trigger, some things around this. But here, we're at the 4th, and you have Mars coming out of shadow. You have Uranus, which is pretty much on top of the Pleiades right now in the Taurus constellation, also in alignment with Algol, the head of the Gorgon, right? Medusa is in a very favorable connection to the nodes of the moon. So this has a pretty significant, I don't want to say a frequency attached to it. That's not the word that I want. Blueprint, I guess, maybe. Either way, it encourages breakthroughs when you're in aligning practical changes with soul level aspirations, right? This is especially the North Node in Pisces, right? Pulling us towards these soul level aspirations at that level, right? Pulling us in this direction. And then you have Uranus that's in a sextile, right? Is a favorable and harmonious connection that requires us to participate. There is something here with the connection to Algol that is requiring us to let something go, to adjust to the situation in a peaceful way by giving up what we don't need anymore and offering offering what we do have to the vital needs of the whole. And this is very much part of this sextile, and you may feel inspired to innovate in some way with Uranus around, and I would say in terms of material, your finances in some way in order to serve a higher purpose, because the North Node in Pisces is definitely moving towards a, spiritual purpose. So think like sustainable things, creative collaborations with Uranus sextile Rahu or the North Node, trusting gut instincts in practical decisions, right? Because we know now, or many of us have probably felt that reorganization of different elements of life, and now it's about like making the most of those those pieces rearranging themselves. Like in this particular transit with Uranus and the nodes, it's like a cosmic nudge, right, to blend the material aspect with our idealism or our dreams, right? And in fact, that has come up a few times. Every time something in Taurus, which was the sun at first, and soon will be Mercury, squaring Pluto and Aquarius. That was just a little bit more of a friction along with it, but still the same thing is like, coming to blend the material aspects of being here and being human and living with our ideals, our dreams, our spiritual aspirations. And this sextile really sets that up. And it's big because it's Uranus, right? It doesn't move very quickly. So you're talking about like breakthroughs here. On top of that, Pluto, right, in Aquarius, the sign that Uranus rules, stations retrograde on the 4th. This is usually a time where the demolition machine gets, turned off or powers down for a little bit, and you kind of go back over and survey the landscape of everything that's been destroyed, right? The hallowed ground, so to speak. So I feel like things will kind of back off in terms of these like really powerful transformational energies of Pluto. It doesn't mean that we're not going to still be working with things. There's clearly energy to nudge us forward. And maybe we get a little bit of breathing room with the retrograde of Pluto. But the thing about this time period also is that this is the first quarter square, which is in a moon in Leo squaring the sun. And this is a time where you activate your personality, you act and you build. So it actually works out pretty well that, it's our capacity to really brave the storm, so to speak, that we can demonstrate publicly, that we feel, emotionally moved to demonstrate publicly somehow, right? Maybe it's even just to ourselves, to celebrate and dramatize what we've been through so far. But we act and then we build and activate our personality at the first quarter moon. So Uranus and the nodes are definitely along for this cosmic nudge that's, pushing all of us personally into a position where we have to activate something in our personality. And then Pluto stations retrograde, and we kind of just like back off kind of this, responsibility in some ways to really use our spiritual energies to instigate some sort of change or transformation, either in others, either in a, and in Aquarius, we are talking about society as a whole. And then we have Beltane on the 5th, right? May 5th, 5 by 5. We have Beltane, astrological Beltane, right? The calendar Beltane is May 1st or May Day, but the astrological Beltane, when the sun crosses 15 to 16 degrees Taurus in Western astrology, is on the 5th. So then we have Beltane. And this is, I always think about Beltane, is when the seed has popped open and the germ is pushing its way up through the soil, right? It hasn't quite reached the surface and broken out into the light, but it is struggling up through the darkness. I feel like that's what Beltane really represents, is the absolute mandate of life to grow, right? And that's astrological Beltane is on the 5th of May, and that's the same day where Mercury and Jupiter come into their sextile. Mercury in Aries, Jupiter in Gemini. So this is very dynamic. It's very mentally stimulating. It encourages bold communication, expansive thinking, and opportunities for growth, right? So I do feel like a lot of, again, if we just go back and tie it together some more, that things have shifted around into a whole new pattern. We've been inundated over the last several weeks with these higher energies coming from the sun and from the earth corresponding, and we are corresponding with that. And now things have shifted and moved around. We're still adjusting physically because that's just what it means to be in a physical body, especially because there are other aspects that are trying to dim or mitigate or suppress, right, through a various means that I probably don't need to tell you here. You probably know what they all are. But then you have things that are, we have the grand square at the new moon, and now we're coming into opportunities in the week following. And this Mercury sextile Jupiter on the 5th, when we have Beltane, is, there's lively discussions, creative brainstorming, right? The ability to see the big picture, and that's Jupiter. And not only see the big picture, but see the details and the big picture at the same time, and a sense in our own awareness that we have everything we need. So there's inspiration to share innovative ideas or like pursue new knowledge with enthusiasm. Absolutely. Opportunities for connection. There's opportunities for learning and travel, right? Mercury is where we learn, but Jupiter is where we travel. We broaden our horizons. So it favors learning new skills, driving, diving into subjects, that excite you and exploring. And, Mercury in Aries is keeping the pace fast and engaging. So that's part of it too, is Mercury in Aries just like bam, bam. And now it's out of shadow. So it's really just like, we're in new territory now. Let's go. So that while the energy of this transit is positive, and we kind of need it as like, this push, and we have Mars out of shadow as well, and we have Beltane, there's a risk of overconfidence here, especially with Jupiter in Gemini, right? It's at its detriment, and so it wants to overcompensate and just really, just over expand in ideas and just endless. And then you have Mercury in Aries, right? So it's very bold. It can be very scattered, too many ideas, and be very impulsive. And information overload. So focus on prioritizing the best opportunities. You don't really want to waste this energy coming into next weekend, because it's pretty powerful. And then Venus and Pluto sextile, Mercury and Chiron meet right after that on the 6th. And, this is one of those healing moments, of course, with Venus and Pluto coming together usually is in a sextile is very intense, and it really encourages you to pursue your passions very fearlessly, right? And there's a visionary type of quality to this. This is about rethinking long-term goals with Venus, especially because Pluto's retrograde now with this sextile. So, like I said, the demolition machine is on a break. And Venus comes in sextiles, and it's like, let's kind of like rethink these long-term goals, like really assess the value of some of this transformation that's already been occurring. And the retrograde of Pluto is deepening our self-awareness even more. And so we uncover hidden motivations, we release outdated attachments. This has been a theme for a while now, but this is really going to support it without Pluto continuing to move through and destroying things, right? Expect subtle but potent shifts because of this. Magnetic attraction, breakthroughs in self-worth, redefining freedom. It's a chance to align with your desires and with authentic transformations. And like I said, the retrograde of Pluto allows it to be a deeper and subtle experience. And then on top of that, you have Mercury and Chiron in a conjunction, coming very close at this point to the Andromeda galaxy or vertex in the Andromeda constellation. So these two coming together, right? There's just a lot of surfacing of old wounds and conversations about old wounds, and being able to experience two levels of being, like being able to experience where we've been and where we're going. So there's that theme again, in areas where you feel inadequate. This is just gonna, I think it's just gonna bring up some wounds, and then you have Venus and Pluto together. That's really just gonna support a sense of fearlessness about kind of going into those deeper spaces and being able to release those old attachments and see how our wounds have been influencing our motivations in life so far. So you might feel an urge to speak boldly about your struggles. Perhaps even sharing some of these things might help somebody else, right? Because the thing about Chiron is he's the wounded healer. And so we use our experiences and share them in order to facilitate someone else's healing, or being able to see things for themselves, So these discussions may resolve around identity, self-worth, or past traumas, and there's potential for breakthroughs. So it continues, these potential for breakthroughs, utilizing this energy, especially if you approach them with courage, right? This is a very Aries theme, and honesty. So things like journaling or just candid conversations with people you trust. And this also can, especially with Mercury in Aries, this can really highlight how you express your pain or your anger. And you may be overly blunt or defensive. It depends on which side of the conversation you may be on, but it encourages humility and empathy on the side of Chiron, right? That we all have a wound that we deal with, and that certainly can make us more empathetic and more understanding. So if you're aware of the tendency to react hastily, if that's a trait that you have, you can channel this into constructive dialogue, or maybe you just need to write some things down, right? So expect public discourse to get very raw. That's one of the notes I had. On a collective level, expect the public discourse to get raw. So think debates about sensitive issues, outspoken voices, it's already like this. It's just going to get more so with this. But there's also moments of clarity and reconciliation that could really happen around this time. So this is the 6th. So you're looking at a week from now plus. So then Mercury moves into Taurus on the 10th. And then, we have the full moon on the 12th. So if we just go a week ahead from the 6th, it's really, oops, wrong direction here, friends. All right. As we come into the full moon, which is actually on the Monday, the 12th, in Scorpio. Remember, you can see that here's actually the full moon is right. If we go back like an hour, you're going to see it directly. Mercury is going to be square a retrograde Pluto, so that's some intense conversations again. And then you have a Scorpio full moon. You have Black Moon Lilith back in the same place it was at the new moon, essentially, almost exactly in the same location as the new moon in Scorpio as well. And then you have this full moon. Of course, we're going to talk more about this full moon when we get there, but we will talk right now, and we'll wrap this astrology portion up before I talk about the membership site with this Mercury-Pluto square, because the sun has already had this position, and anything else that comes into 4 degrees Taurus is going to square Pluto probably at the same degree, right? So the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, that is what 4 degrees Taurus is. So the riches that come from linking our earthly nature with our divine nature. So again, there's that theme of being able to be in both places, to be able to link our material experience as a human with our soul's experience as our connection to spirit, and the riches that come out of that, the abundance that we experience from that situation. So it's interesting that it continues to be in a square to Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius, which is really demonstrating, those powers, those capacities that we've developed through this, right? Linking these two aspects, the healing capacity, and demonstrating them, putting them into society in order to heal, basically. It's interesting this is where Pluto has been, and how it has had profound transformation. The thing is that the healing is so profound that it's killing off all of these outdated attachments and, really purifying in a lot of ways that which is not able to stick around anymore. So, these squares to Pluto from Taurus, these fixed squares already with the sun and now with Mercury at the full moon, it can create, it's an intense energy. There's a lot of intense energy revolving around Pluto during, this season, this Taurus season. So the Mercury square Pluto can create intense mental focus, stubborn communication because it's in Taurus, and power struggles and conversations. And with Pluto retrograde, you may find that maybe things aren't nearly as intense and stubborn. Maybe the power struggles aren't nearly as outrageous, but they're going to be on things that maybe have already transpired. And yes, there's pushes for transformative, unconventional ideas in Aquarius, right? And it's clashing because Taurus is very much about like tradition and value as well. And so there'll be debates over values versus progress, right? With potential for obsessive thinking, uncovering hidden truths, right? So the retrograde of Pluto may soften the overt conflict, but it will deepen the internal tension, if that makes sense. So there may be conversations that are happening that may be more reconciliatory, or maybe people are coming to an understanding more, but where the tension is going to be experienced is internally, as people are kind of grappling with like what is happening here, and what, and debating within themselves, of the value versus progress. And I think that you're going to see a lot of conversations, or just people being very thoughtful and intensely thoughtful come the 12th with this full moon. And, as with all full moons, it will be a time to clarify our purpose. And this will be a moment where, we can come to discover, I think, the poetry of the soul. That's actually 23 degrees Scorpio. Some imagery associated with that is a rabbit, and this is the full moon itself, the rabbit metamorphosizing, right, changing into a nature spirit, the raising of the primal animal drives to a higher level, the poetry of soul as it mirrors each person's ongoing achievement in character and skills, the thorough self-conquest by which an individual subordinates his naive and animal impulses to his ideals. So it really just kind of brings to a culmination point of all of the value and everything that we have developed and invested in terms of our own reality, right? Taurus is about the tangible reality that we are, that is ours and that we are investing into. And the full moon in Scorpio is going to be like this illumination of, the fullness of that investment, right? And the new moon starts with, we've already put some value into certain things, whether it's a tradition, whether it's our land, whether it's our income, whether it's our resources, whether it's our energy, right? And expecting how expecting what's going to happen in the future and being able to prepare for that based on what we've developed so far, or what we value, what is ours, right? Taurus in the second house is what is ours. So then we get to this full moon, and the social confirmation of natural excellence. It will be very clear and at least illuminated, and will clarify our purpose once we get to this full moon. So, all right, friends, I'm going to transition over to a little bit more business. So thank you for being here in terms of the astrology. And let's get into the information about my new membership site. So thank you for sticking around. And so I'm just going to share with you the screen. So everything has moved off of a third-party platform that it had been, which was Subscribestar, and I have all of my membership content now is going to be through catalystenergies.net, and I'm going to show you I'm just going to show you what to expect if you are interested in signing up. So when you get to my homepage at catalystenergies.net, it's actually linked in the description box. You'll hit the homepage. If you're not signed up for the emailing list, this banner will immediately pop up and you can sign up. It's free. I often will soft launch specials, reading specials, discounts, new things to the email list first, so you can always get ahead of things. I sometimes make special offerings for promotion purposes to the email list. I really don't spam you that much, maybe 2 to 3 a month, just letting you know what's going on, if there's anything new. So you get to the page, and if you're interested in the membership, you just go up to Catalyst membership, and you hit the tab here on the menu, and it'll take you to all of your options where you can sign up, and it tells you what all of the different options are, how much they are, and what's involved. When you do that and sign up, you will have the option of being able to create your own login information. So I made my own, and so you get your username, you make up your password, right? Then you sign in and you have your own account. And then when you come to the website, you will see, as you can see here, that you have a banner that opens and it gives you all the pages that you have access to as a member. So the Catalyst membership page is just a landing pad. It's got nothing on it right now, but the energy readings are where the collective energy readings that I record are going to be posted. And as you can see, there's already one that I did, and that was available to the email list and to current subscribers. So my friends, if you are interested and you want a one-stop shop for everything Catalyst Energies membership, you get a dedicated discount code. I'm actually have it set up that when you do sign up for membership, you immediately get an email that gives you your dedicated discount code for my store, and you can go to the store and you can pick readings, Reiki sessions, digital downloads, gift cards, add-ons, all the stuff that's up here, minus the packages because they're already discounted. You can apply that dedicated discount code at checkout, and you get 10, 20, or 30%, depending on what it is that you are subscribed to or what membership tier you're part of. So that's really all there is to it, my friends. There's not much to it other than that, but I just wanted to share it with you. This is the official launch. Everything's live. You can sign up there. And just remember that you are supporting a local small business. Your membership supports the website subscription that allows me to even have a membership site and to have a website. It also supports things like getting a new wireless microphone so that I can use that and have better sound when I'm doing the readings, or any of the administrative costs, right? The email list and things like that. That all costs money. So your membership actually really does support the administrative costs of being able to keep doing this as well. So my friends, that's going to do it for today. Thank you very much for being here. I truly appreciate all of you so very much. Please take care of yourself. Please take care of each other the best you can. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, everything you need is in the description box below. I think I'm pretty sure that the Subscribe Star link is still there, so I'm going to change that as well and have the link directly to the sign up page if you want to just link to it from this video platform. All right, friends, I'll see you on the full moon forecast on the 12th. Be good. I'll see you later. Bye.